welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of Wednesday, August 13th, 2014. This is our first meeting since the end of June due to Council summer recess. So as we begin our tradition of multimodal roll call, I'm expecting, given that it's been such a long window, that everyone will be able to raise their hands for every single item. So since our last meeting at the end of June, who has commuted by bus? All right, good dozen hands.
In this country?
Any country at all. I'll go back. Who has commuted by train?
Yeah, right here.
By bicycle?
Right here. I think you got me wrong.
On foot?
Yeah.
Let me just go a little off topic. How about skateboard?
No, my son.
Well, except for the skateboard part, I do want to acknowledge that our new general manager of LADOT raised her hand for all methods of transportation. So you are our multimodal roll call winner for the day. Thank you very much. So we have a busy agenda today. There's a lot of stuff to get moving on because there's been a pile up during the council recess. Please, folks, if... Thank you. There's a lot of stuff to clear from the docket today. Thank you very much. I understand that there are quite a few public comment cards for the preferential parking district items. Almost all of them are in favor of the items, although one is marked as general comment. I would be inclined to recommend we just move all of those items on consent and approve them quickly. If people would prefer to speak on the items, then we can hold the items till the end of the agenda and consider them at that point. Is there anybody who has put in a speaker card for any of the preferential parking district items who would prefer that we have a full hearing on them instead of moving them now on the consent calendar? All right, and my recommendations would be to move items 2 through 10 on the consent calendar.
Excuse me, well, just to let you know, because I don't know if the residents understand, these are going to be approved right now. And if you would want to speak on these issues, you could change the cards to public comment, but that will be at the end of the meeting. Is that correct? If they wanted to stay around and speak on any issues, is that necessary?
My recommendation was to move them on consent.
Move them on consent. They're approved. So.
All right. So items 2 through 10 are approved.
That's two of the...
There is one other PPD item which is on the special agenda, so I'm going to adjourn the regular meeting. It is now 2:15, so I will open the special meeting and entertain a motion to move special agenda item number 1. Mr. LeBlanc, is that your motion?
On the special? You do have the special right here.
It's another PPD item.
Yes, this is one correction, so I hope
Yes.
you can move this as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so we will deem that moved. Special agenda item number 1 is moved. All the PPD items have been approved. We will now adjourn the special meeting and go back to the regular meeting. And we will start with item number 1.
Item number 1 is a general manager from LADOT to present verbal report relative to the status of DOT's ongoing projects and programs.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, committee, council members.
Welcome back to the Transportation Committee.
Thanь you.
Today is day 3.
Day 2.5.
So you have solved all of our traffic problems in Los Angeles?
You said December.
All right.
It is a huge honor for me to be here. I am at the moment in listening and learning mode. I'm spending my time getting out to see all the great work that the staff at LADOT has been up to. I want to, I hope that I can have the opportunity to tour each of your districts with you, preferably by foot or by bike, and with you and whomever you'd like to bring along, so that we can talk about some of the transportation issues that you're facing and that you're hearing about every day. I did want to just give a little bit of a plug. The Active Transportation Program grants have just been announced, and the City of Los Angeles got over $22 million, I believe, for projects to improve safety and mobility in the city. So this is it's a great moment for the city. It's a great opportunity for us to pull together to deliver those projects and make good on the hard work that everyone put into all of those grant applications. But for the moment, I'm here to listen and learn. I'll be here for the duration, and I'm looking forward to meeting with each and every one of you.
Glad to have you here. Just wanted to see if we once a month have the report from the general manager here at committee. I just wanted to see if any of my colleagues have any questions for you at this time. Okay, so you'll get off easy this time.
Great.
We'll have a lot to hold you to account for next month.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
You bet. Thank you. All right. Next item would be item number 13.
13. Item 13 is a Huizar-Buscaino motion relative to requiring all entities and agencies that remove an existing speed hump to replace the speed hump within 60 days of completion of their work and further instructions.
We have staff here to report on the item.
Good afternoon, council members. My name
Good
is
afternoon.
Sherman Torres. I'm with Street Services, and I'm here to report that as of May 1st through present, we have completed 108 speed humps, and we have a backlog of 24, of which we are currently doing as we speak. Our goal is to be in full compliance with the ordinance. A new ordinance has been passed, and all removals will be completed within 60 days. That's it.
All right, so let me step back a second for some who may not have the full context. The city currently does not have a speed hump installation program, but it is the city policy for pre-existing speed humps that if they are removed due to street resurfacing work, they are to be replaced within 60 days.
That is correct.
And there had been some slippage in that, and Councilmember Huizar put in a motion asking for some action and for a status report. And so you're saying that since that motion has gone in, there has been significant progress?
That is correct.
Okay. There are 24 remaining that need to be caught up
Which will be completed by the end of August.
by the end of August?
Yes.
Okay. Has that been done with existing city forces?
Yes, sir.
Very good. All right. And what is the department's expectation for how quickly they will be able to keep pace with any speed humps that are removed in the coming year during resurfacing?
Once the speed humps are removed, they will be replaced within the 60 days, as the new ordinance states.
Why did the backlog happen?
Lack of resources and the speed at which we're going to be able to accomplish the annual resurfacing program. And we weren't staffed to set back and replace the speed humps. But since then, we have made adjustments and come up with creative ideas in which we are able to keep up with the existing forces that we do have.
So you're adequately staffed for this fiscal year?
No, sir. We have made adjustments. We have been able to utilize the forces that we do have through effective planning and coordination.
So the resources you have this year through the stuff you've been doing will allow you to keep pace?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Colleagues? Okay. Well, then I'm going to recommend we receive and file that report, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a number of items that all sort of fall under the same rubric of coordination between Bureau of Street Services and LADOT regarding street resurfacing and restriping and signalization. I'm going to recommend, colleagues, that we hear items 11, 12, 14, and 15 together, unless anybody has an objection. Okay. All right.
Item 11 is the DOT report relative to the workmanship and quality associated with the installation of continental crosswalks and bike lanes pursuant to an Englander-Cedillo motion. Item 12 is a Blumenfeld-Bonin motion instructing DOT to report on the department's coordination with street services to connect traffic signal loop detectors and reset the signal timing after street resurfacing reconstruction projects are completed. Item 14 is a budget memo number 148 relative to striping of city streets. And item number 15 is also a budget motion instructing DOT to report relative to creating a metric for the average number of days to restripe the street following street preservation activities, including recommendations for the need to develop such a metric, and establishing a goal of restriping within 10 days following street resurfacing.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Selwyn Hollins, Department of Transportation.
Before you start, Selwyn, let me just note that it's purely by coincidence, but the last time we really had a substantive discussion about the issue of coordination between street services and DOT, particularly over restriping, came the same time that Mr. Muckery was named the acting general manager of DOT. And I think during his general manager's report, he came and made a commitment that we were going to address the backlog and get this taken care of. And I guess it's become a tradition now that Ms. Reynolds is on board. We're having the discussion again. It seems that while the backlog was eliminated, the backlog is back. So that's sort of the frame from which we begin the discussion. If you could take us back a little bit and tell us about what happened since Mr. Muckery made that commitment, what happened to address the problem, and why the problem is back.
Okay. I believe Mr. Muckery came before the committee in December or January of this year. And at the time, there was a commitment to utilize contractors to help catch up with an extensive backlog that dated probably a year or 18 months backlog. And it was primarily on the issue of slurry. And there needs to be a distinction between resurfacing and slurry. Okay, 60% of all the pavement preservation work is slurry, which is a different process than resurfacing the street. When you resurface the street, there's a 30-day commitment notice. There's plenty of time for the Department of Transportation to prepare designs, work orders, and prep our crews for deployment. Slurry is a little bit less pre-planned. So there tends to be a backlog. It's not on the major arterials necessarily. So we just got caught up, or we had so much that it became overwhelming. The city did increase its resurfacing and pavement preservation over the last 2 years exponentially. Concurrently, there was not the balance of resources. So in utilizing the contractor, the work got completed, but we ran out of money. Okay. So our appropriations were depleted around April of this current year, or which was last fiscal year. At the same time, street services began to ramp up to finish out the end of the year. And that created the backlog, another backlog situation. So, in regards to efforts to address the situation, a number of things have been done. First of all, I would like to say on the issue of resurfacing, we have had turnarounds of 10 to 21 days. Okay. Slurry has been a little bit more erratic. Our turnaround times have ranged from 3 days to 77 days. Most of the longer periods were during the last quarter of last fiscal year when we ran out of funding to purchase materials and pay for overtime. Actions taken, first of all, our goal of 10 turnaround days are clearly communicated as a top priority to all affected engineering and field op managers. We have also participated in biweekly executive meetings with the mayor's office, street services, general services, the city attorney, and the CAO, where we talk about this fiscal year's resurfacing and pavement preservation process. We also engage in monthly meetings with the Department of General Services on vehicles and equipment, where we talk about our resurfacing and the equipment that's needed to keep up. We do have new striping equipment on order with the Assistant of General Services Department. However, that equipment is custom made, and it's going to take about 8 months, so we anticipate it should be here by March of next year. We are in the beta stage of a new work order system. We have been using a paper-based system for the last 40 years. We have been beta testing it, and this will allow us to not only provide more transparency and accountability on how we process our work requests, but also to key, different performance indicators and to monitor it a lot better. On the coordination component, because we had such a major funding challenge, we have reassigned a senior management analyst, and that individual will be, part of their responsibility will be to make sure we stay on top of ordering and inventory, et cetera. And we have also reassigned a storekeeper to assist with that, and they help with the inventories and the tracking and the orders and purchases because it became so overwhelming. But I would like to state that we do still face continuing challenges. As indicated in the report, there are significant staffing needs, and we do have anticipated retirements that are impacting us. There are funding shortfalls in overtime, materials, and contracts. Our equipment capacity, which is also discussed in the report, we have a very limited number of vehicles, and we do have a lot of out-of-service downtime. And we do need to continue to work with street services on the advanced notification of slurries. On the issue of equipment, to put it in perspective, we have two long line white stripers. Okay, most of the stripes you see in the street are white lines. Okay, the center lines are yellow. One of our stripers, one of the two white, has been inoperable for well over a year. So we have one striper. It's been at GSD because we've had mechanical breakdowns about a third of the year, last fiscal year. In addition, GSD handles engines, oil changes, things like that. We handle the apparatus. So that one vehicle is on the blink quite a bit. Again, it's going to be until March before we get another piece of equipment. So another point to make clear is the level of, I guess, workload. Street Services operates with 8 crews every day, 7 days a week, performing resurfacing. They have 4 doing slurry. Sometimes they ramp it up to 7 days a week. So you're talking 12 to 15 crews 7 days a week performing pavement preservation. Our department has one mark-out crew for the entire city. The mark-out crew's responsibility is to go out with the design measurements and pretty much create the diagram for the permanent striping. We have one yellow striping crew, one white striping crew for the entire city. We do not work 7 days a week. Okay? It's almost, one analogy was given was, if you're a sports fan and you play the game of basketball and you have a team of 12 against a team of 3, that team of 3 is going to chase that team of 12 around, but at some point they won't be able to keep up and we won't be successful. We did put in a joint request with General Services Department and Street Services. We're part of a joint request to get positions filled in order to support the current resurfacing program. All of the positions that we need were on there. The Managed Hiring Committee did review it. They approved the filling of all those vacancies. However, it was based off of transfers and promotions. And so we do have some positions that are entry-level positions where we won't be able to expand our resources. We will be able to pay people more money to do the same thing, but we will not be able to expand our capacity. So we are continuing to work with the CLA's office, the CAO, to hopefully get some relief on that, at which time we can try to expeditiously hire the staff we need and train them to do the work. So those are challenges we're going to continue to face as we move forward. It should also be noted that this fiscal year we're doing more resurfacing than we've ever done in the history of this city, and our resources have dwindled at the same time. So despite all of our efforts to try to do the work physically, it is a very labor-intensive and costly effort to keep up with. On the financial side, a couple of points. We transfer every year anywhere from $3 million to $4 million from other accounts into our paint and sign account to keep up. Okay? That's one thing. Overtime for resurfacing, we spend over $2 million a year with our people going out to try to keep up. And that's been the case for the last 3 or 4 fiscal years. In addition, last fiscal year, the contracting costs doubled just to keep up, to catch up with the backlog and all. So we spent $7 million to our contractor to help keep up, and we still are not able to meet the demand. So I just wanted to put that out there, that this is if you look at any agency throughout the nation, when it comes to the issue of pavement preservation, it's a very cost and labor-intensive process. Many cities are struggling with finding enough costs. I mean, you can do a simple internet search and you will see that it is a major challenge. And so we want to be very clear and factual to you. We want to be very transparent, but at some point, the workload demand is beyond our ability to keep pace.
Let me start with this. The lines that are put on the streets, whether it's crosswalks or the lines down the center lines, there are certain types of different types of streets, secondary highways, these collective streets. Are there certain types of streets where we as a city are required, because of the type of street, to have a center line?
Obviously on the major arterials, yes. There are some residential areas where maybe in the past we had, but some of the guidelines have changed so that because of the width of the street, we no longer need to put center lines. When you slurry those streets, however, as the slurry dissipates over time, the previous center lines start to reappear. And so a lot of people who are used to seeing a center line may not have known that the requirements have changed, and so they want to see the center. They want it to appear like it was before. But center lines obviously are major safety consideration, and so all of your major arterials and secondary streets, you'll see us that's usually the first thing we try to put out there when the street is dark. After
if we don't restripe those, we're in violation of some sort of law or state code?
Based off of the measurements of the street.
Okay. Then a lot of the other ones that we've put in, whether it's a crosswalk or a stop line, we have put in for safety reasons. So by not repainting promptly, we are, I presume, exposing ourselves to liability.
I would like to put this out for consideration. We will ensure that any place that needs to be striped will be striped. What I cannot assure you is our goal of 10-day turnaround. That was a personal goal our department made. I can't assure you of that on a consistent basis. But anything that's dark, we will get it striped. We are committed to doing that. We have no intention of leaving anything dark for legal reasons as well as for safety reasons.
So how are you right now? I mean, I drive obviously a lot in my district, and I have seen a lot of streets that have gone dark because they've been slurrying in my district over the past few months. And there's a lot of streets that I drive, not like Lincoln Boulevard or Venice Boulevard, but neighborhood streets that used to have crosswalks, that used to have a stop line. Some of them might have had a center line that have been gone for, I'd say, over 6 weeks in a lot of cases. How do you prioritize then when there's such an exhaustive backlog? What comes first? Is it?
Yeah, pretty much in general it's typically first come, first serve, but we do have a lot of mechanical breakdowns. And so, for example, when our white line striper goes down, there have been times it's been down for over a week. What happens is everything piles up, and the fact that street services work 7 days a week, particularly over the weekends, it really backs up. So our crews go into high gear, and we burn a lot of overtime just to try to keep pace. But our equipment is aged. I mean, we have some pretty crafty people on staff who find ways to tinker with it and make it keep working, but it's beyond its useful life. So.
I know how ingenious some of our folks are. I was out doing a crosswalk one day, and the machine that melts stuff wasn't working, and they actually used a blowtorch. It was before Salita started, and I actually texted her an image or a video of what her future staff was doing. It was impressive. They were determined to get the work done, and I really, really appreciate that. But if we're having chronic equipment failures, and it's going to take us until March to get a new machine, I have no idea if this is feasible. It's not in my notes. I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head here. Is it possible? Have we ever borrowed another piece of equipment from the county or another city, or done some sort of rent agreement so that we don't have to wait another 6 months? Because by March, I mean, the backlog is going to be staggering.
Yes, we have explored that, particularly with our contractor, because they have the best equipment. You should be aware the equipment that we use is in excess of $500,000 to $700,000. They were open for a very short window of time, but they rely on the equipment as well. This is not equipment that people have sitting around waiting to be leased. Very highly specialized equipment, and companies that have that equipment are very protective of letting it out. But also, too, keep in mind, that would entail increasing our contract appropriation, which is extremely limited. So obviously, if they knew we were in a bind, they would be willing to help us out, but not on a continuous basis.
And have you guys explored doing any contracting out to deal with this backlog? I know you don't want to increase the line item, but have you?
Yeah, we have. I mean, like last year, we spent $7 million with our contractor to help with some of the backlog. Generally, we spend on the contractor $2 to $3 million because they also help us grind out some of the striping. We don't have grinders, so they come out. If, let's say, there's an intersection that's being resurfaced from north to south, we will put the Continentals on all four legs. So the perpendicular street is not being resurfaced, and so we need the crosswalks grinded out, and they'll come in, and then we can do all four at the same time. If we're modifying the design or the layout of the street, they come in and they grind. So we use our contractor regularly. The existing contract also has provisions so they can help with striping and paint work if we need it. But again, our appropriation is very limited. What we did last year was a decision was made to find other areas where appropriations were, defer those types of activities so we can keep up with resurfacing, because resurfacing and the safety elements are so high that it warrants being at the top of the priority list.
As we explored doing Great Streets programs throughout the city, one element of that is going to be pop-up stuff. Some of that will be restriping of a bike lane or maybe some changing of parking. Is that going to be draining these same resources?
Everything starts and ends with funding. Our funding is pretty much at the edge. For example, we all know what happened recently over by UCLA and the construction, and we were out there. We had to restripe the street. Street Services was out there repaving, but that didn't negate all the other work that was still going on simultaneously. We don't have disposable funds for emergencies and other things. So yes, it could, if the scheme of that great street goes beyond its intended, beyond its planned purposes, funding could be an issue.
But it's going to be the same one broken machine that's going to be doing...
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned there's a difference between the time lag between a resurfaced street, a reconstructed street, and a slurry seal street. Why is that?
Well, resurfacing is a bit more, Street Services is here. They can address what goes into resurfacing, but it's a different type of process than covering a street with slurry. Okay? When you do a resurfacing from a lay perspective, you're pretty much, removing the existing surface and repaving it. With slurry, you're covering the existing surface. What they do with slurry, we don't get a 30-day commitment list. What we get is, we get notified a month, weeks, days. They're very good. We communicate on a daily basis. But in general, we get a map the week before that says, hey, these are the blocks we're going to slurry next week. It may be no blocks this week. It may be 100 blocks next week. It may be 40 the next. When we had staff, we would follow that and we'd be prepared for it. But there are times when, in that week's period, there's a change in what they actually have the opportunity to slurry. And so we wait to be notified, what did you actually go out and do, because we don't have the resources to go out and follow and look for stuff. So we rely on that. Now, when they do slurry, they close the whole street down. When you resurface, you can see that maybe they do a lane or two, but it's a whole different type of process. When they do 100 blocks or more, that's not continuous blocks. It's blocks. That's the code language you use, but it's blocks. Not that they're doing an entire block, but they're doing blocks throughout the city. Again, I don't have resources to keep up with that type of demand, because for us to stripe a street, if you've ever seen it in action, it's a very precise type of effort. We have to get those lines right. The lines also have to line with other streets that aren't being resurfaced. It's not as though we just get a machine, drive down the street, and magically it just maps it out. There is equipment that could do that, but it's extremely expensive, and if something were to happen to that piece of equipment, we'd be down who knows how long. So what we do is we use what we call, like our long line stripers have melters that go hand in hand, and we're really creative at keeping equipment up as much as possible.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if everyone else was aware of this, but it's kind of shocking to me that we are adding resources to our street preservation plan and not having nearly the resources to stripe it. It makes no sense to have a budget that doesn't absolutely connect the two, because you're creating unsafe situations by doing that. So I would hope we look at some form of action where we get you more resources for the striping, because the connection makes no sense. I mean, we get constant complaints, we have a lot of close calls, and some that are more than close calls caused purely by not putting back the lines where they should be. I missed a second because I had to take an emergency call, but I don't know if you discussed why we're waiting till March to replace this piece of equipment. Why can't we replace it sooner? Is it on order and has to be physically constructed?
Yes, the bids went out. They were processed. The company was awarded the contract, and now they can begin building the equipment. It is a very special, complex type of equipment. Just to give you an example, when we get the thermoplastic, which you see on the streets, it comes in hard, solid blocks. So we have to heat it to over 400 degrees to melt it down and get it out there. This is not getting a paint bucket from Home Depot and putting it on the street. It's a very unique equipment. Any mishaps with the firing engines and all that can be very disastrous. So it's great care to make sure we get equipment that's, one, reliable, but two, is that is effective for completing the job.
So did we think it was more cost-effective to pay a contractor $7 million and a lot of overtime ourselves by not staffing up and not having the equipment? How did we get to this point?
I think it's the pace at which resurfacing was occurring. We follow the lead of street services. So it was a very hot year last year. When it rains, usually there's a lull. We're used to a lull every spring because it's rainy season, and there isn't much resurfacing of slurry. This past fiscal year, I called them up in February and said, hey, when are you guys going to slow down so we could, catch up? And the weather was so great, they just kept going full steam ahead. So we're driven by their work. And in addition, our same crews, though, are overextended to do other work, other maintenance work throughout the city. I don't have dedicated crews because I don't have enough resources to just do resurfacing. So there are times it gets backed up.
Well, I assume my colleagues are having the same frustration, but it seems to me like we're not positioning our resources in an effective way relating to pavement preservation and striping. So hopefully our follow-up will be some encouragement to change how we allocate these resources. I mean, personally, I don't care if we don't hit the exact goals of as much pavement preservation, and if we could take some of that money and put it to striping so they actually match, which seems like the most sense. Now, were we also discussing speed humps at the same time?
We did the speed humps while you were out of the room.
Well, let me ask a question anyway, as long as you're here and you might be able to answer it. I know we don't have a speed hump program, but we're trying to catch up on the replacement speed humps anyway, so some activity is done. I have a couple places in my district, and I think there are a few others scattered throughout, where either a developer or a community group wants to actually pay the full cost of everything and put in a speed hump. I know one developer that paid for one or two, and has been anxious to fulfill his obligations to the building that he built and the surrounding community. Is there any way as part of that process that where we have the full funding available for the speed humps that we can put in speed humps that were requested?
You're referring to new installation of speed humps?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we've done it with a couple of council offices where they had a similar situation. There is the issue of petitions, there's the issue of designs and so forth, and there were situations where a developer covered all costs. At DOT, we don't have the staff or the resources, but we are aware of certain consulting firms that we've worked with in the engineering field who have helped to facilitate that. So it's been done. The most recent one, I think, maybe was a couple of years ago.
It's good to know, because in our case, no matter how we've asked and who we've asked, they've just said no. And we have the money, we have the community, we have everything, but the no we're getting from you guys. Yeah. So how do we get past the no when other council members are getting a yes?
Yeah. I would say send it to me personally, and I'll follow up with the appropriate staff and provide the assistance.
That would be great. Thank you.
Are you okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, one thing I would request of to follow up on the speed hump thing, if you and Ms. Reynolds could work over the next month or so and come up with an idea or a procedure so that if someone wants to fund a speed hump, that there may be some sort of template guidelines someone could follow so that it's not an exhaustive review process for the department, but that can make stuff like that happen. So there's some guidelines instead of this one-off kind of stuff.
Mr. Chair, can I actually ask one more question?
Yes.
I assume other cities are all struggling for resources as well. Are you aware of what other cities like San Francisco are doing in terms of striping?
Yeah.
Do they have the same understaffing and rundown
You will
equipment?
find if you go from Chicago to New York to Atlanta to Florida, they all have the same thing. Where we're kind of unique in a lot of cities, particularly in California, is that we do the services with city forces. A lot of cities will do a very limited number of resurfacing projects, and they do utilize contractors. So, but the turnaround time, because they do less of a scale, it's usually a couple of weeks or more. I am aware of cities that go 6 to 8 weeks before they stripe after they resurface in the state of California.
So it sounds like the bigger difference is that we're doing a lot of resurfacing, perhaps compared to other cities as well. So
oh, definitely
exacerbates the problem. Okay. Thank you.
Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing us to have our 832nd discussion about this problem since I've been on the council. It has been something that has been persistent throughout, and let me just say, especially as Budget and Finance Chair, I am extremely sympathetic to your plight in trying to keep up with limited resources, and in particular, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on this and everybody else, that the striping crews are principally general funded. Is that right?
They have been funded through Proposition C.
Okay.
In the last couple of years.
Okay.
They also have the ability to be funded by the Traffic Safety Fund. However, that's been kind of dwindled. So primarily it's Proposition C, and there are concerns about the future projected deficits in that fund, which
Right.
kind of complicates it a little.
Right. The pavement preservation program, for the most part, is special funded.
Correct.
We're starting to support it to some extent, but it's mostly special funded. So there's inherently going to be some imbalances there in where the funding sources are to do those two different tasks. And I very much appreciate your reiteration of your commitment to catch up, but I don't know that it's possible. Because, as you've delineated, there's a 7-day-a-week operation at street services. You don't have a 7-day-a-week operation. And you have more limited crews than they do. unless they just stop at some point, that vector is going to continue to widen unless there's more balance between the funding and the staffing of those two operations. So I think that's an inherent problem that we have to remedy. And I'm not sure that we can strike that balance. I'm just thinking out loud here, but so long as these are operations that are in two different departments with two different mandates and with two different funding sources, I'm not sure that we're ever going to be able to strike that balance. And I'm beginning to think that to the extent that we can consolidate these operations in a single department, we need to do that so that there will be one point of accountability. And let me just explore a little bit how we might be able to, at least in the interim, though, figure out some ways through this. As I understand it from the report, there's a single yellow, you have two long line striping machines.
Crews.
Okay.
2 crews.
But operating two different machines.
Yes, we have 3 yellow long line striping machines.
3?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe on the report it's on page, if you go to page 9. Page 9 highlights all of the vehicles we have dedicated to our restriping, the 4 mark-out trucks.
So 3 yellows,
3
2
yellows,
whites,
2 white.
1 crew to do each of those
Correct.
jobs. Now, are those crews cross-trained on this equipment?
The equipment is the same, however, you can't mix the paint colors because of the lines. So, like, we have one, let's say our only white striper goes down. You can't mix that color into the yellow because you
Right.
won't reach that purity of the required yellow striping.
But if one is down, that crew can go to work on the other color striping while they're waiting for that.
Yes, they
vehicle
could
to come
potentially
back
work
up.
on yellow, yeah.
Okay. And how about the permanent pavement markings, not the long line, but the permanent pavement markings? Are they cross-trained to do that as well?
Yeah, what happens is that we have 3 area yards, and each yard has a crew that does the crosswalks, the pavement markings, which are your arrows in the street, your word markings. But those crews also do all the maintenance in the city. So they're juggling between resurfacing and keeping up with maintenance. For example, we get a call about a faded crosswalk, or there's something that happens. It's the same people. They're doing both. We don't have dedicated
But
marking.
for example, when your crew for your yellow long line striping vehicle, when that vehicle is down, that same crew could go to backfill the permanent pavement marking crews to get
Some of them are
trained.
trained. They're different job class levels. So yes, they're capable. They can help, but first of all, the ones who work on the trucks, that's very specialized equipment. It takes years to get that, and there's very few people at a certain level who can operate our striping trucks. Okay. But a lot of them promote it up through the ranks. So yes, they may be familiar with how to do pavement markings and other things like that. But there's, without knowing when a truck is going to be available, they do help out here and there, but we got to get them back to resurfacing, or else the backlog will just keep increasing.
Right.
And again, it's an equipment issue. I know you referred to putting the departments together, but a lot of cities do it, a lot of agencies do it, but they balance their equipment and their resources. Here, even if you merge the two together, there's an imbalance in equipment.
I get it, but that's exactly the point, and I didn't mean that to be at all a criticism of DOT. My point is that the mandate of street services, especially when we're getting to measurable outcomes and all that, they're putting down miles. They want to record miles, and if striping those miles is not part of their mandate, then it's hard to tell them to ease up because we're holding them accountable by strictly measuring the number of miles they're putting down. And we're putting accountability in the wrong place. It doesn't relate to the ultimate outcome that we want of a complete, finished, resurfaced, striped street. And that's the inherent problem here, I think. So each one of these long striping vehicles costs in the neighborhood of what?
A long striping vehicle is roughly $718,000.
Okay.
That's for a long line striper. So we're getting one
Okay.
in the spring. The melters, those I think run 400 to 500,000, and they melt what we do is we melt it and transfer it over to the stripers to keep things flowing.
Okay, and I'm assuming that those are very durable pieces of, or in theory, they're long-term durable pieces of equipment that are MICLA funded. Those purchases are MICLA funded.
No, ours were not MICLA funded. We were
Why
giving.
not?
I don't know. We received roughly $1.2 million to buy some new equipment last fiscal year. We ordered the vehicles we needed. We were short about a little over 200,000, so we absorbed it out of our own existing funding appropriations to cover the few pieces of equipment that we're receiving.
Okay, I don't want to put too fine of a point on it, but we have to have redundancy in these vehicles. We have to have enough capacity that you don't stop because the vehicle is down. That's just inexcusable, and we can't allow that to happen. So I want that fixed. And if it's MICLA funded or whatever else, we have to get you that redundancy. Okay? So let's make that happen. We have schools around this city that are being slurry sealed for pavement preservation during the school year. And so children are walking across busy streets for weeks with no crosswalks. That is an intolerable situation. It just can't happen. So the backlog has to be dealt with, but it's also a matter of coordination of timing, too. And I don't know if that's if you're in a backlog situation, then maybe we need to figure out a way that DOT works with street services to say, the quadrant around a school, for example, ought to be done during the summer months, and not because we're not going to be able to get the striping done. That's the kind of coordination that I expect to see between these departments, because it's just, we've been saying the same thing literally since at least I've walked in the door, probably as long as since Mr. Parks walked in the door, that we can't have a situation where we're achieving this goal of slurry sealing a bunch of pavement and putting people's lives at risk. It's just to me inexcusable. So, but we've said that many times, and I'm not seeing an action plan yet for fixing it. So I don't have a specific situation, Mr. Chairman, but one thing I'd like to do is consider these motions in Budget and Finance, and I'd like to explore where we can remedy some of these resource issues. But I think that it would probably also be important for you and I and the mayor's office to put our heads together about how we can get more of a coordinated effort between these departments to try to create a comprehensive outcome here. And since you mentioned the example of San Francisco in your question, I think we even asked you this the last time you were here, but do you have thoughts about how we can sort of coordinate with street services more effectively on this?
So thank you for the question, and because the councilman mentioned San Francisco, I felt like it was bait, lure me up here. There's a couple of fundamental differences. One is that the voters in San Francisco passed a $300 million bond to resurface the streets a couple of years ago. And that brings me to the second major difference, which is that there is no managed hiring in San Francisco. So because there was this dedicated funding stream off budget out of the general fund, the departments were able to add significant both equipment, because the equipment some of it is bond eligible, and people in order to keep up with the sort of mandate of the voters, which was to raise the pavement condition index score of the city as a whole. And that wasn't through slurrying, it was through resurfacing. So you really are tearing up the street and putting it back, which actually gives you huge opportunities to do lots of things around utilities and other things that need attention underground. The surfacing, Department of Public Works does the resurfacing. The Municipal Transportation Agency did the striping. So there, and the MTA is not even part of the city in terms of it answers to a different board. So the need for coordination and collaboration was incredibly high there. So there are actually groups that meet to talk about this on a regular basis, and most of the work is done by city forces. And that is because those same city forces are the ones that are doing all of the projects that the MTA is planning and that the MTA is designing and putting together, and they're highly specialized. These are different designs, we're doing different things, and so it's important to have that high level of training and familiarity with the city streets. They do go in first and put down tape as soon as a street is resurfaced. The tape lasts about 6 months, or can last up to 6 months, so that buys you a little more time.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
We have used, I don't know if what tape they're using, and hot tape is a little different. That's where you heat it down. You may have, most in Southern California, everyone's gotten away from tape because when tape starts to peel, I don't know if you've ever been on a freeway, and a few years ago you used to see like tape strewn over the street. So it was an issue of, that was a decision made years ago not to go that route. The thermoplastic is more durable. It lasts 6 to 8 years easily. Once you heat it up and put it down, it cools within a minute or so. I mean, it's very durable. You don't have
I
to
gather
go.
this is just temporary tape until the thermoplastic.
It's just a way to demarcate. What they're talking about is the demarcation. We do markouts where we use actual paint to mark it out. We don't use tape. We have paint, and you'll see floppies, you'll see paint on the street, and then we come in and we thermal over that. So we chose a different approach, and most of the Southern California agencies took a different approach.
For most of us, what we see is black pavement, no paint, no nothing. We see a slurry sealed black pavement with no markings at all. Sometimes there's the reflector things that are dropped down on a big street, but other than that, I don't recall having seen lines painted out.
But even if you were to put that out, you still have to have crews to go out and put, even if we did tape, and so we don't have that level of set. We have one markout crew that goes and follows all the street resurfacing projects, one markout crew. That crew has, I think they have 3 people. They're supposed to have 4. Okay, and that's all we have. So even if we were to do some intermediate thing, and we're looking at intermediate steps, we're actually reaching out to the local trade schools. We have contacted some other agencies. We're looking at signage types of warnings and things like that, but you still need somebody to physically put it out there.
Okay. So, and since managed hiring has come up, I understood you to say that the positions that were requested to be filled actually did clear through managed hiring, but the problem was that...
It's transfers and promotions at this point in time. At least that's the response they gave us, was that you can fill them, but they must be transfers or promotions.
Okay.
So we didn't have the latitude, so we're working with the CAO and the CLA to try to get some special consideration because this is such a high priority to the mayor's office.
So the positions still have not been filled?
No, I have on my electrician side as well as on my striping side, some of the key positions where we have the real worker bees, those are entry-level positions. And there is nothing that can transfer into those. They must come from the street, or from, not the street. They must come from outside the city.
New hires.
Did you understand? I don't understand that. I'm sorry.
Okay. In the city, when you hire people in an entry-level position, typically they take a civil service exam, get on a list, and they come from, they're not currently city workers.
Okay.
So that's what we're not able to hire. It's people who, the only people we can hire under what was approved were people that already work for the city, meaning they have to transfer from another department or agency in that same job classification, or they can promote, or they're eligible to promote.
So have you filled the long striping positions with promotions then?
Here's part of the challenge. No, we have not. Part of the challenge is if we promote, for example, some of the people entry level break up the thermoplastic, and they put it in, the machine to heat up. When you promote people, now we don't have anybody to do that. So all we did was just improve morale, pay people more money, but we need to expand our resources. And you have to do that with new blood. We have the same thing on our signal side. Okay,
So when we authorized positions during the budget process, I think we were under the assumption that that meant there would be additional personnel added to do this task. And what you're essentially telling us is managed hiring said, yeah, you can fill this slot, but you need to take it from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like me saying I want to hire an additional legislative staffer, but I'm taking it from my field staff.
Well, Mr. Chair, I do want to clarify I don't want to speak for managed hiring, but they know it's a huge issue for the department. We're working on trying to figure out how we're going to deal with all of this. It comes from the Tier 2 pension issue. We've got to get a handle on that. We realize you can't start hiring and robbing Peter to pay Paul if you're not bringing people up. So we hope we'll have a solution soon.
Well, I certainly hope so, too. In fact, I'd say more than hope.
Well, I would just clarify, too, this doesn't just impact us. I mean, the Department of General Services, who maintains the vehicles, as well as Street Services, we put in a joint managed hiring package specifically for the issue of resurfacing. So we all are impacted by that same decision. So it's not just simply us. Even if we get out and we start doing more and we start running these trucks hotter, GSD needs mechanics to help keep the vehicles back on the road, and it's not. I don't want it to give the impression it's just a DOT issue. We have been working collectively at our biweekly meetings to highlight what's needed to deliver the results that are desired.
Not to complicate this even further, but we haven't discussed the loops. Right now, I understand we have a backlog. Well, first of all, for the benefit of everybody, explain what the loops are and why they're important, and what the situation is with them, because this feeds into the same issue.
Yes. Okay. As everyone knows, all of our signals are connected, so to speak. And the way we manage our signal and automation is through what's called loop detectors that are embedded in the street. So you may notice these circles in the street, and there is a magnetic formula. The engineers could explain it better, but pretty much it recognizes when a vehicle is passing or sitting on it to tell us volumes, to affect the signal timing, etc. We have roughly...
This is the nervous system of ATSAC, essentially.
Yeah, this is it. This is how we know everything. So we have roughly 65,000 or over 65,000 loop detectors embedded in streets throughout the city of Los Angeles. Last fiscal year, we replaced, I think, 5,800 that were damaged. Every time a signal is damaged, we get a signal immediately. So we know it's damaged, we know where it is, and we send out whatever staff we have to investigate it and try to resolve it. Resurfacing, I know one of the motions is concerned about when the loops are damaged, resurfacing. They're only up to, I think, 3 inches to 4 inches below the surface. So every time you resurface it, it damages the loops. But that's not the only time loops are damaged. Loops are damaged from various construction projects. People cut into the street, and then some of the streets that start to deteriorate, the loops become exposed and they get damaged. So last year we replaced roughly 5,800 loops. I think our current backlog is about 3,800 loops. We do utilize a contractor to help with some of that. But again, to help supplement that. But I will say this. When the loops are damaged or destroyed, it's not an issue of safety. Our signals are still working, okay?
But they're not synchronized as well if the sensors that are...
In some cases, yes. In some cases, that can be an issue. So...
Let me ask this. If I am a private entity and I'm doing a construction project, and I have permission from the city to dig up the roadway to do some utility work or something like that. The city requires, under certain conditions, that we fix the road back to the condition that it was in. Are they required to also fix sensors?
Those, particularly those that are well-planned, yes, they either use their services to install and we inspect, or they'll reimburse us.
Okay.
There are projects that happen where, like anything, they cut an electrical line or they cut something else, and those you have to go find them. So we try to track who is working out there and get them to fess up that they are the ones that cut it.
So,
Those are more difficult.
a few years ago, Department of Water and Power started charging recreation and parks for their water use. If street resurfacing does something when they're doing a project that damages one of the loop sensors, are they required to pay for that, or is DOT required to pay for that?
DOT covers resurfacing.
Out of general funded stuff or Prop C?
Both. We have accounts for signal maintenance, and we've been using that.
I'd be open to the idea of having street services have to pay for the damage that comes to the sensors from the work that they're doing.
You're on the MTA, get gas tax money for it.
I'm too busy trying to find that light rail line down to San Pedro for you, Tom.
A typical loop replacement is about $600, and on some stretches it can be $18,000. It could really add up. So that's an interesting concept, but I think as a city, if we budget accordingly for what it truly costs to resurface a street, I think we'll be all better off. Chasing down someone to reimburse us is just more administrative processing. The reality is, what does it cost to truly resurface the street and get everything done properly?
So this is a conversation you'd like to continue in Budget and Finance?
You bet.
All right. Mr. Parks, do you have any questions? 830 times?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Koretz.
Just a couple thoughts in advance of budget. One, I'm not sure it's fair to say that we all expected managed hiring to do what it should be doing. I'll remind all of you that are on budget that I suggested that we look at eliminating some or all of managed hiring, because I think it's now at a point where it's more of an impediment than an efficiency and money-saving step. I think particularly in this case, it's just slowed us down. And when we budget for something, we should actually expect that positions that we've budgeted get hired and work gets done. And it's certainly not just in this circumstance. I think it's all over the city. So I think it's something we should revisit in budget. I also don't know whether the same special funds that are paying for our streets could be applied to our striping, and if so, why we would exclusively use the funding mechanisms that we're using that are short and not pull some of that money in to actually do the pieces that are missing from the resurfacing. And as you said, fund the whole process properly and find the right funding mechanisms and just do it, because we've been chasing this for years. We've discussed it before, but I think this time we actually need to solve it.
And that issue will be discussed at length with all of us.
And if I could just ask staff that they work with the MTA, because you fund county projects just like other cities. What do other cities do? Is there some mechanism that gets it in? At Hillhurst and Los Feliz, street services paved it 6 months ago, but the loops are not there anymore. At London and Bellevue and Silver Lake, South Silver Lake, trees are overgrown. Surrey Street, stop sign, no lane stripes. And that also spells liability too, right, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes.
Okay. And then also the last thing too, I hope after 90 days and welcome to Los Angeles, you maybe sit around with Public Works and see if there's a model that makes sense. That Public Works, we're all getting the seal of the City of Los Angeles on everybody's check. So it's the same people. So just try to figure it out, because sometimes it helps in a way. Thank you, Mr. Bonin.
You're welcome. We had public comment card, George Wolfberg from the Great 11th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I saw this item on the loop detectors on the agenda, and it just got my hackles up a little bit because as you started the meeting, you said, who is commuting by bike? Well, if you come to a loop and it doesn't recognize your bike, you'll never get to where you want to commute to. And there are loops like that need to be repaired. There's a mandate, a state mandate, that when you go in and start adjusting the loops, you're supposed to make them have the ability to detect bicycles. And there's certain markings that should be there so the bike riders know where to stop. And if you're on a narrow street, the bikes queue up, the peloton's there, there's a car behind them that would have triggered the loop, but they don't get to the loop. They're there forever. So somewhere we need to provide the resources to DOT so that the loops will get fixed and whenever they go in there to detect bicycles. It's simple. Consequences of budget cutbacks, we've listened to them for the last 20 minutes or so. I used to work on the city budget. I think you're running out of smoke and mirrors. Sorry.
Thanks, George. One last public comment card, Charles Leone from SEIU 721.
Honorable Chair, members of this body, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today and just want to echo what has already been said about the needs of the Department of Transportation. Earlier this year, you all authorized positions. To this day, those positions haven't been filled. And I just want to echo the good work that DOT is doing and the commitment that we have to the city to make sure that those positions get filled. If you look at their report and the line where it talks about the paint and sign division and how it's been reduced by 31.3%, I mean, it's pretty staggering. And yes, there have been ongoing issues that we've been trying to deal with as a city, but I just don't feel like it's fair to hold DOT hostage when we have an ambitious program, ambitious expectations, ambitious services that your residents depend on every single day. And when you start talking about safety issues and liability issues, look at DOT, look at their budget, look at field operations, look at how they've increased the use of some contractors in the past. Let's bring this work in-house. They are doing great work. We look forward to working with the new general manager, and I echo wholeheartedly this idea of having departments also work together, and let's just figure it out. So the positions that they were looking for in the budget, let's make sure that they get filled because those are the services your residents depend upon. And let's not hold that department hostage. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. Without objection, we will refer these items to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Okay.
We have one final item, item number 16.
Item number 16 is the Bon and Buscaino motion relative to authorizing DOT to accept monies from the entities representing Dodger Stadium, Staples Center, LA Live, Hollywood Bowl, Greek Theater, and the Los Angeles Coliseum and the sports arena for traffic management services associated with the special events at these venues and related matters. After discussions and further review of the motion and talking with the department, I've prepared a substitute motion that should be before you. We recommend that the authorization be capped at $2.87 million and then for each of the entities as well. That's based on previous years. And then also, since the motion was introduced to DOT, it stated that the city's reimbursement costs are based on the original 2009 amounts. So we'd like to, I would recommend that we have them negotiate so that we're fully reimbursed.
All right, without objection, that'll be the direction of the committee. That takes care of the agenda. We have one general public comment card from George Abrahams.
Excuse me, John White, City Clerk. So for 16, did you approve the motion with the amended?
As amended by the...
Thank you. As amended.
Okay, our neighborhood is extremely grateful to Tom for getting us the PPDs. It go a long way to granting us the relief we need. There's one other thing that can be done to help us and also work to the benefit of both tourism and to the neighborhoods is that if a dash bus were to be created that would run from Hollywood and Vine going up along Franklin to Western, up to Los Feliz to Ferndale, going into Western Canyon Drive. And if in conjunction with Parks and Recs, they could cut a trailhead from Western Canyon Road going up to above the Bronson Caves, that would allow tourists to get the iconic Hollywood view photo opportunity. There would be a lot of ridership. It would be a revenue plus for the city, and it would enhance tourism and also grant the Beechwood Canyon neighborhood and the Bronson Canyon neighborhoods much needed relief.
Thank you. No further business, right? We are adjourned.
No. One more. I have a card. I pass it on. It's Vincent.
Oh, I didn't see that one. All right. If these are general public comment, if these were on the PPDs, we move those items on the consent.
Mr. Hinman's is general public comment.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Dennis Hyman. The Census Bureau's American Community Survey results from 2010 through 2012 have essentially been flat for all modes of transportation in LA, including the people that work from their homes. The ACA results for 2013 will be released next month. We should consider whether the $1.1 billion spent constructing the Expo line and the Orange Line extension, how does that compare in increasing the mode share of transit for 2013 compared to bicycling? Bicycling lanes and paths in that amount of time, there was $30 million spent. Although the Mesa Transit projects can have more impact on getting people to change modes during peak hours in the immediate area compared to bicycles, these types of projects will not be built into a dense network throughout the city. Bike lanes are now located in about 12% of the arterial collector streets. A small proportion of these are built into a network. So the comparison, ACS results does not tell you the count throughout the city, but it can tell you a comparison of gain. And because of the both are having capital construction, transit, and bicycling, it's a good way to compare the two, the effect over time. 2013 results in 2014 will give an indication of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we are adjourned.
For an item.
We're adjourned.
You said that our comments could be heard at the end on general.
Did you fill out a card?
Yes.
What's your name? What's your name?
Sarah Jane Swartz. Hey, Mike, could I run the committee?
You can.
Yeah.
Item 4.
It'll be a committee of one. It was for item 4.
Ms. Swartz, if you want to speak, you can speak right here. But the committee's been adjourned, so we could hear it. Okay?
I came all the way down here, so I can.
Well, but our interest is trying to solve the parking problem.
Well, the committee is here. I spoke to you about.